This is it, the video we've all been waiting for. At least it's some of the moments I've been waiting for. Enjoy this little bit of tomfoolery here as I use janky little tie straps, really, ratchet straps, to pull this FJ right into position for my homemade engine lift system. What's that? A tow rope in a tree? A chain? What could possibly happen? A little carabiner. Then I figured out this system, which works a lot better. I just pinned the vehicles together. Hey, this is flat towing, Florida style. Love it. Worked great. I did see a little drag tire marks after, but it's fine, I'm sure. But it worked out. I had to do this by myself, though, so there was no one in the FJ. Just me driving the truck, no one steering it. I had to keep getting out and turning the wheels a little bit here and take the key out so the steering would lock. Let's take a short break to show how I siphon gas when my wife asked me to get gas and I'm too lazy to go to the gas station. Okay, now I propped up the hood so I can start taking this off by myself. So, how to flat tow or tow your car around the yard by yourself, and how to take a hood off by yourself. Great little how-to videos here, very quick. So I popped that shock off there and unscrewed, bolted these, and then you'll see I have this foam mat. I shoved that in between so my paint wouldn't get scratched. Because this baby is a beautiful... JK, there's scratches everywhere on this car. Okay, I couldn't show you doing it because I did it by myself. So I went around the other side and used the mat in between and took off the other two bolts. And then the hood was laying flat, and I kind of slid it forwards and picked it up and grabbed it and then carried it over. This hood is quite short, so it worked out. Well, maybe not as short as a minivan one. So, motor mounts. Maybe you've been wondering, how do I replace motor mounts? Well, there's a big bolt here, and then there's two there, and they actually come all the way out with their nut, but they have a tab welded on so that the bolt head won't spin while you're fastening the nut on there. There's also two down below. I think that's if you want to just lift the engine just enough so you can slide those out from the bottom. When I started lifting this engine, you have to go up like a good 2 inches or 3 or 4 inches to be able to get those motor mounts out if you don't undo those bottom two. So there's the bolts in place. And here are some of them out. Alright. Bonus points if you find the hidden ratchet that I had stuck underneath the lower oil pan or upper oil pan. See, just won't come out. Just like, oh, come on, get out of there. And you have even more stuff, like the power steering pump is there, and lines going and everything if you haven't torn down your motor, torn it apart like this. So, since this baby is just going to be a core and there's no chance of rebuilding it because it's totally destroyed, I'm just going to use the head bolts to lift it. So I had one piece of chain, one in this corner and the other in the opposite corner, and then I have this 2-ton come along. And looking back here, it started to separate as I lifted it, and then I just shook it back and forth until I got those splines of the torque converter that they go onto the transmission just to slide out gently forwards. That's why I unscrewed the motor mounts as much as I could, because this thing had to come out forward and then up. If you get this off with the torque converter still in the transmission, if your engine is not seized, you're able to do that. And in that case, you can lift your engine straight up. This one had to come forward because the torque converter could not be removed from inside. And I'll show you how to do that later. But being seized, it was not possible. So, now I've got it up here. Got some room down there. Those lines there, transmission cooler lines, definitely have to be unbolted from quite a few mounting spots. There's a fly in here. To be able to get the engine and the lower oil pan past. And here we see the splines for the transmission, and that is a dry area. Maybe people might have known this. I didn't know this. In the bell housing, it's a dry area. It's sealed, the torque converter is sealed, transmission sealed, the engine sealed. You should not have anything dripping out of there. If you do, you might have a rear main seal. Okay, so the starter goes right here. And then once it's removed, you can put your wrench through and start unscrewing the bolts into the torque converter that are right on the flywheel. And then you turn the flywheel a little bit and do the next bolt and do the next bolt and do the next bolt. And they built it that way specifically so you could remove it. So here's the space I have down in here. If you're wondering if you can fit a V8 engine, how to fit a V8 engine in an FJ Cruiser, you've got like 22 inches across, I think it was, or 19. I'll get the measurements later. I measured on my Tundra, the V8. It would fit, but it would be a very tight squeeze front to back. Okay, this guy's hanging here, seems fine. And I'm just pointing out, don't catch it on that front edge of your hood. I finally got it out and lowered it onto this little sled, which is my old Tundra bed liner. And I'm taking out the knock sensors. If you're ever wondering what a knock sensor is like, here's your chance. I have no idea what all this black goop is everywhere. I don't think that comes factory. But essentially, it's just bolted down like a big thick washer. And somehow there's some kind of wire coil or something that's a sensor in there. Piezo, who knows what it is. That can feel the vibrations, I suppose, of your block. Those are super pain to get to. And I see you see my mouse house down in there. With all the fiberglass or insulation he found and brought up in there. So there's those. I don't think they're very good for reusability at this point. So make sure you get those 2 bolts under there. This is fast forward, showing you how I remove the upper oil pan. I'm just taking this thing apart so I could hopefully get the torque converter off safely, because I can't rotate the crankshaft, okay? So the torque converter is still stuck to here, demanding its ransom of my blood from my hands, trying to squeak in between there. So under this plastic cover plate, there's also, see, you might want to see this because you might want to, take out your upper oil pan sometime to do something from below in the engine. Once you get all the bolts out, the rubber, whatever, silicone seal, whatever it is that someone scooped on there, breaks fairly easily. And here we have just a goopy, sludgy oil pan. And here we have a burnt looking, gross bottom of an engine without any visible defects. The rods aren't cracked. You can't tell really anything from below unless you had a really tiny scope to shove down there. Like if you shoved through the oil pan, through the oil plug hole. That's just something that I think that fell from above when I was taking it apart, perhaps. Or maybe it's something else. So these rod bearing caps or crankshaft holding caps, bearing holding caps, are what I would like to remove so that I can pull the crankshaft out and the torque converter and the flywheel straight up and out of here. I thought I'd give it a start. So start with a couple easy bolts to get the torque converter off. Those were the great easy ones. And then there's 4 more that are all circled around, of which I cannot get to very easily. And you'll see how to do that later in this video. Someone else told me how to do it on the internet. I read it, and I tried. I gave up, and so I'm coming to this technique here. I had these little bumpy inside sockets from Harbor Freight. I forget what they're called. They're terrible if you try to use it on a bolt, a regular bolt, 6-sided head. They will strip it. They're supposed to contact the flats and really grip and turn your bolt by the flats, but they're horrible. Do not risk it on any rusty bolts. Okay, so I got all those out, and it's these babies that will not move. I tried to use a house jack to separate the steel of the motor. I tried everything. Now here's between the flywheel and the torque converter. There's just no space. Or between the engine and the flywheel. There's no space. So I had one of these, tried it, didn't really fit, and even so, it couldn't turn, didn't have enough torque, which is those 2 sides. See, that's horrible. I actually cut off the socket on top and bottom until it was skinny enough to fit in there, and it still wasn't helpful. So I got a wrench, a regular box wrench, attached to that, another wrench, attached to that, a breaker bar, small one. And here we go. There's a pin on the engine this is rotating around. Boom. Now it did fall off at the end, but that was after I broke it free. And then I just had a million times had to take that tiny box wrench and wiggle it up and down to get those bolts loose. All 6 of those. So you're supposed to go through here, take that one out, rotate your flywheel, take the next one out, rotate a little more, rotate a little more, and that's how you get the torque converter off, so you can remove the engine without the torque converter. But I had to do it this other way. Oh, I'm glad I got it off.